Good afternoon, good evening, and welcome. My name is Roger Berkowitz. I'm the founder and academic director of the Arendt Center here at Bard College. And I'd like to welcome you and our panelists here to our second public living room conversation that we're doing here. These are attempts to expand our ability to listen. That's how I see it. To hear and talk to and listen to people who we disagree with. And so the way the living room conversation works is that we invite 6 people, 3 generally from one opinion side, and 3 generally from another opinion. And we ask them very structured questions. I want to emphasize that at least in the conversation here at the beginning, we don't expect it to be a debate. We expect it to be an exercise in people expressing their opinions and other people listening. There are 3 questions that we're going to ask, which have been agreed upon months ago when I invited the people. Are going to be, and I'll repeat it each time so we have them. The first question is, who are you? And what are your core values? What makes you tick? The second question is going to be, since the election of Donald Trump, the level of contempt and, in a sense, even dehumanization in politics, and the impossibility of talking to people one disagrees with has been elevated. How important do you think it is, and why, to talk to people whom you either strongly or even vociferously disagree with? And then the third is, and here's where the listening really comes in, what did someone else on the other side say? What one thing that someone else on the other side said that surprised you or made you think differently than when you come in here? Those are going to be the 3 questions. I've asked all of our 6 conversationalists to limit themselves to 3 minutes for the first and 2 minutes for the second. 3 minutes for the first, 3 to 4 minutes for the second, and 2 minutes or so for the last question. So we're going to try and keep these quick, and then we can enter into a discussion that involves all of you. Let me also announce let me say 2 things. First of all, there is in the back, please raise your hands, a number of people from Brave here. They're in the back there. If for whatever reason people feel I thank them for coming. We invited them, and I'm really happy they're here. If for any reason people feel the need to talk to someone or leave, one of the Brave volunteers can go out and accompany you and give you the help you need. So please be aware that they're there. You should have found on your seats, we didn't have enough because it's senior project day at Bard and Central Services was busy, but you should have found homemade printed cards with the ground rules. This is a living room conversation model. I should say it's not exact, because living room conversation has 5 questions and it's private, but we've modified it and we've talked to the living room conversation people about it. It's an open source project. And so, but the guidelines have been provided to all of us, and now they're all to you, and I'm just going to read them quickly so that they're in all of our heads. The first one is be curious and open to learning. Conversation is as much about listening as it is about talking. Show respect and suspend judgment. Human beings tend to judge one another. Do your best not to. Find common ground and appreciate differences. Look for a ground you can agree on and appreciate the differences in the beliefs and opinions of others. Be authentic and welcome that from others. Share what is important to you. Speak from your own personal experiences. Be purposeful and to the point. Notice if what you are conveying is or is not pertinent to the topic. And own and guide the conversation. So, with that, let me introduce the panelists who I'm really thrilled have all of them have joined us here. To my left is Ethan Quinones. He's a student here at Bard College from Troy, New York. He attended Troy High School, and he's currently working on his BA from Bard in Political Studies and would like to attend law school. His academic interests include Hannah Arendt, politics, philosophy, and morality. Next over is Ralph Benko. And let me just say that Ralph has been involved with the Living Room Conversations project since its beginning, I believe, or almost. Early on. And he's the one who introduced me to Living Room Conversations and to Joan Blades, who was the initiator of it. And I want to thank him for that. He will, if need be, also assist me in moderating. He's an internationally syndicated political columnist and member of the Conservative Action Project. He's editor-in-chief of The Supply Side and author with Charles Cadlick of the 21st Century Gold Standard for Prosperity, Security, and Liberty. He was detailed as a deputy general counsel in the Reagan White House and founded the Prosperity Caucus, was a member of the original Supply Side movement with Jack Kemp. He's also famously been called by Gene Weingarten in the Washington Post magazine the second most conservative man in the world.
We're number 2, but we tried hard.
And I've never figured out who the number 1 was, but we'll see. We'll see. To Ralph's left is Lucian Wintrich. He's a Bard graduate. He graduated from Bard in 2012.
A little overweight, so they sound more defined as they walk out.
All right, we're going to try and keep to the ground rules here. He's a American political artist, commentator, and the current White House correspondent.
People tend to turn in the floorboards.
Before we begin, can we, Lucian? Part of the ground rules is to be respectful. All right. I'm going to try and introduce the people and see if we can get past the introductions. An American political artist, commentator, and current White House correspondent for Gateway Pundit. In October 2016, he was the curator of the first conservative art show in America, where he collaborated with Milan, Martin Shkreli, and Gavin McInnes. His controversial photo series, Twinks for Trump, initially gained Wintrich's national attention after he exhibited the series at the Republican National Convention. And as I said, he received his BA right here at Bard College in 2012, where he majored in political science and was barred from the film department. That's what he did. I should note that if you Google Bard, or if you look on Bard at Google Maps, you'll find some quotes on the side, and one is from Lucian Wintrich. And it says, "Bard was all right, I've had better, but I've also had worse." My main qualm is that after placing my order, a girl in the back mixed it up with a Nietzsche and a Nagel compilation, and it took them 4 years to sort things out and deliver on the diploma. 3 stars for education, 2 for service. I'll give them the benefit of the doubt and settle at 3. Needless to say, I won't be returning. So, welcome back. To his left, in all senses, is Annie Seaton, founder and director of the Difference in Media Project at Bard, where she also teaches in the Human Rights Department. She's also an artist, and her artwork has appeared in the 2014 Whitney Biennial and in museums and galleries nationally, internationally. She was a teaching artist in residence at the Witte de With Museum in Rotterdam in 2015. She's currently working on a book, Project Race and the Pastoral, and she did her PhD.
As gay, I don't like to label myself as something, but they forced me, this school, I will say, forced me into a box where I had to say, okay, well, I am banging a really twinky theater major here, and we've been going steady for a while. So women have nothing to worry about. And then that case was dropped. And then all of a sudden, just again, by virtue of the fact that I was sort of espousing conservative beliefs, they said, well, then maybe you have a coke problem, because these ideas are not what we're teaching you. And I said, well, you know, the price of Coke in upstate New York is like $150 a gram. I don't know if that's changed. So it's hard to have a Coke problem up here. So that's also not the case. And it all ended up fizzling out wonderfully. There were a couple civil rights organizations that got involved. It is very interesting to be back on these grounds. And again, the wonderful quote that the musicians here are always incredible. They find the best musicians.
We're out of time, so if you can finish up.
Okay. Now, the people they bring, when Bard recruits literature or creative writing majors, they're not sending their best, okay? They're sending people with a lot of problems, and they're bringing those problems back to Bard. They're bringing crime, they're rapists, they're bringing drugs. Some of them, I'm sure, are good people, but the vast majority aren't. And that's why we need to cut back on some of this, some of this funding towards terrible creative writing majors.
Dude, answer the question. Who the fuck are you? Like, come on.
I am the White House correspondent for the Gateway Pundit.
All right, we're going to have questions in a little bit. For now, I'm going to move on to Annie Seaton. Annie, please use a mic. Please. Yeah.
Hi, everyone. So, who am I? Well, I think, you know, I agree with you, Lucian. I think that shutting down debate and sort of, you know, pigeonholing and targeting people because of who they are is pretty terrible. So I was actually in my mother's womb when the FBI came to our house. You know, so I was already being profiled because my parents knew Bill Ayers, some of you might have heard of. And they thought that perhaps my pregnant mother was hiding him in our apartment. I don't know, somehow, if I was already implicated in that as well. And my aunt, my mother's sister, was one of the Chicago Black Panthers, and she was asleep in an apartment with some of her friends, including a guy named Fred Hampton. And she watched her boyfriend be murdered, and some of her other friends as well. They were assassinated by the Chicago police and the FBI for the crime of thinking the wrong thing. So it's true that, you know, there really are times when it becomes difficult to have certain opinions and beliefs. So, you know, that was where I was born, kind of into the radical left. And my first paper when I was 6 years old was about Watergate and Nixon and how I thought my family should move to Canada. But I'm also a qualified member of the DAR. I'm the descendant of free Negroes, slaves, and slave owners. My parents are, my dad, who recently just passed away, was a white conservative Republican man who wrote for the Wall Street Journal and the Weekly Standard. My mom's a leftist black woman who dragged my dad to Angela Davis lectures, and he would take her to conservative retreats. And so who I am is I'm someone who grew up in a family of incessant debate and difference. There's every single imaginable racial, political, sexual orientation, etc. In my family. You know, my dad's funeral, which we just had, was an unbelievable, you know, spectrum of people. And I guess, so what are my core beliefs? They have a lot to do with things like intellectual inquiry. Ultimately, if I really think about it, paradox, irony, equality, close reading, which if any of you have been my students, you know I hammer on about. The right to differ, the right not to be imprisoned by or in a particular category, whatever that is. Like the teacher that I had in 4th grade, Mr. Palomera, who I looked him up and he's a principal somewhere now, who told me that I was artificial and a product of technology because the races weren't supposed to have met. The thing that I've loved about being at Bard is that it's, for me, been a place where I've been able to sort of be all these complex parts of who I am, and I've tried to sort of, you know, give that back to the students that who've taught me as much as I've taught them. So thanks.
Thank you. So who are you, Clark?
Hi, everybody. I'm Clark, and I'm nervous. senior here at BART, so I graduate in approximately 24 days, but I'm not counting. I turned in my senior project today, which I've spent the past 11 months writing about Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and the way that social media has the potentiality to fragment the self and turn us into having a real versus a fake self. Thanks, Annie. Specifically relating to gender and sexuality. Past my senior thesis, I grew up in DC with a federal agent for a father and a therapist for a mother, so dinner conversations were very bland because no one could talk about what they did during the day. I went to my first sit-in when I was 15 years old for the Keystone XL pipeline, against the Keystone XL pipeline, I should specify. And I've continued to be involved in politics from about the age of 14 or 15 because of growing up in an area that is so, literally the hub of politics. I grew up in a very accepting family with an older sibling who is also queer and who also went to BART, graduated in 2014. And I feel very lucky to have that in my life. I have a very strong passion for music. Roger mentioned I've run one of BART's 2 music venues for the past 3 years, the Root Cellar, and I've brought a lot of my favorite musicians to BART, and I'm going to be continuing to do that once I move to New York City in 24 days. In terms of core values, I got that question in Roger's email and immediately yelled down for my housemates. I screamed from the second floor of my house and the words, "Who am I?" And I have no idea what my core values are. But I would say that compassion, honesty, acceptance, and creativity are all very important things to me. I have a deep care for all of my trans siblings, especially those who are people of color. By early March this year, 9 trans women of color had already been murdered. So that's something to think about and something that I think about and carry with me every day as a white trans person, especially as a trans masculine person, not a trans woman. But I think that relating to this panel, honesty and acceptance and compassion relating to the honesty that other people are going to have up here. I hope. I'm very honored and scared to be here. Thank you.
So I've been asked to remind people again, please speak in the mics. They have a simulcast, and we need the mics for people to hear us. Kevin, who are you, and what are your core values?
Thank you, Roger. Thank you, everyone, for coming out tonight. My name is Kevin Barbosa, once again. I'm from Queens, New York. I was born and raised there. My family moved here from Brazil before I was born in order to give my sister and I a better life. And since then, I've spent every day in my schooling and work that I've done trying to honor their sacrifice in moving here. I've lived my life in a lot of different interstices, where here my family has been able to provide for me and make sure that I've had a good education and all of these things, but at the same time my cousins still live in the favelas in Brazil. So I've always known very much that I'm very privileged and I have a lot to be very grateful for, both to this country and to my family. I grew up in public school. I went to Catholic school for a bit, where I learned that we should do unto others as we would have done unto ourselves. I am no longer a practicing Catholic. You kicked me out very quickly, but I was there. I then, in New York, went to public school, and in public school I came across a program called Prep for Prep. It's a community-based organization that seeks to find gifted and talented students in New York's public schools and puts them in some kind of boot camp, and then places us into the most prestigious and elite private schools in New York, for better or for worse. So I went to the Browning School, a school founded by the Rockefellers, an all-boys school, and there I lived once again in a kind of interstice where I would get on the subway home, and I would be leaving this place of opulence and wealth in between Madison and Park, and I would go back to my family, and we would live our lives, and they would constantly remind me, you're not like your classmates, you're not rich, you can't go to Vail, and I'd be like, why? But it was questions that I didn't have a natural answer to because of how young I was. As we got older as students, I started to understand better, and I started to understand better that there were things that were out of my reach because of socioeconomics, because I am gay, which I realized at a young age, because of my skin color, which isn't to condemn all of my classmates, but to realize that there were differences in between us. As we got older, they became less important. When we were children, they weren't that important. And I tell you all of this because who I am. It's a project. But I have developed a strong set of principles that guide me and that allow me to do the work that I've done here at BART. I believe in equality. I believe in fairness. I believe that certain things are self-evident, such as the ability of everyone to pursue an education, pursue their passion, pursue whatever it is makes them happy equally with no kind of repercussions for you being yourself, unless you being yourself brings harm to others. So I'm excited to be here with everyone, and I'm excited for our conversation.
Excellent, thank you. So our next question is sort of, now that we all know each other and our core values and have a sense that people have things they believe in and things that drive them that are in some sense idealistic. Now the question is, we live in a time since the election of President Trump in which there is a real tendency and even need, I think, on both sides of the political divide in this country to at times reject, condemn, and have contempt for people on the other side. I think a lot of us, if we think honestly about it in ourselves, know that it's true for ourselves. And yet, some of us also wonder and think about whether it's the right thing to do. So I'd like all of you to think about and answer the question, why is it, well, first of all, is it important to do something like this? Is it important to listen to and reach out to and try and at least bridge, or if you can't bridge, at least make an effort to bridge the divide between people who fundamentally disagree in politics in our world, or not? And if so, or if not, why? So maybe I will start with Annie this time and go down and around. Is that okay?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that this notion of bridging the divide for me is so natural. As I said, I feel like I was kind of born into the divide. And sometimes it can be funny, you know, it can be sort of this humorous thing. Like I remember my mom telling me that when she realized that my dad, because my dad became a conservative sort of partway through their marriage, and when she realized that he was going to vote for Bush, she said to me, "Annie, you know, you've read Lysistrata, right?" Many of you won't get that reference, unfortunately, Closing of the American Mind, but it didn't work. But, you know, he still exercised his freedom. Another point, my black grandmother said, you know, well, Lincoln freed the slaves, and she wanted, I think it was Reagan she wanted to vote for, maybe the first Bush, and my aunts and mom discussed taking her hostage and not letting her go vote. But, you know, apart from that, I think one of the things that I saw in the recent lead up to the election that in many ways I thought was almost worse than the animosity between the Trump voters and what became the Clinton voters was the hostility between the Bernie people and the Hillary people. I went to undergrad at Wellesley, and it got so ugly that it was excruciating. There were people who were still really angry at each other. And it struck me multiple times that there was a lack of exercise of what I consider to be democratic values on that side. So, you know, and then when I see sort of a lot of the classist nature of critiques of, you know, the Trump voters when they were referred to as deplorables, that didn't strike me as a very constructive way of engaging people any more than when Mitt Romney said that what did he say, that the 47%. Those kinds of remarks I think don't work. You know, when I was in grad school at Harvard, I do remember that professors would regularly refer to the whole middle part of the country where I come from. I'm a proud Iowan. They called it the flyover. You know, so I think on some level the election of Trump means that the flyover has struck back, and do we really understand, you know, how to talk to the people that I grew up with in Iowa and Michigan, laid off auto workers who think that it's the fault of somebody in, you know, coming in from Mexico or somebody living in Japan or China, that they don't have a job anymore. So I do really believe that it's more important than ever to find ways to talk to people that don't consist just in sort of reducing them to kind of dehumanizing categories.
Thank you. Clark, do you want to please use the mic again?
Yes, here I am. I'm gonna take the thing out of the thing. So this is a very tricky question for me because I'm a very strong believer in sticking to your guns, you know, having your own opinion and feeling it strongly and being able to enforce it with theory and empirical evidence. I'm a sociologist. I do think, though, that there are limits. But I think that being at Bard has, in a lot of ways, helped me figure out bridging that divide of being able to talk to those who disagree with you. When the question was asked, the first thing that popped into my head is that I am heavily surrounded by and do myself have, I would say, somewhat of a firm belief that all cops are bad. My father is a cop. So I'm in this space where I can't talk about it at home, and when I do, it's very uncomfortable. You know, my sibling feels the same way, my mom feels the same way as I do, but we just don't talk about it at home. And not talking about politics my entire life growing up because one of the four of us disagreed with us is something that has bothered me my entire life. So I do think that it's important to speak to those who disagree with you. However, like Kevin said, I think that it is also important that with talking to those who disagree with you and speaking of those who disagree with you, you do not harm them. And when I use the word harm, I do not just refer to physical harm or physical violence. I also am thinking of psychological harm and emotional harm. I think that there has become a very strong culture around the idea of emotional abuse and psychological violence and what that means and where those lines are drawn. And I think that the lines are very blurry. And when it comes to the question of free speech, I spoke on a panel on free speech just a couple weeks ago. So this feels a little bit like an overlap in some ways, but I think that there is a difference in hate speech between, or there's a difference in free speech between hate speech and that which actually is harmful to others and where the line in hate speech is drawn. And I think that when you speak to those who disagree with you, there are ways to do so without harming others and without bringing up things like identity politics, which is usually where the disagreement comes in. there are ways to talk about politics and talk about theory and talk about legislature without bringing in identity politics as well. And I think that that is a very key role in talking to those who disagree with you and being able to have a civil conversation.
Thank you. Okay.
So there are a couple of things that I kind of have always taken to be self-evident, which, as referring in my previous answer, equality, fairness, justice, equal access for all to different kinds of public services, opportunities, all of these things. The equal access to the American dream, if you will. How we get there is where we all seem to start differing, because a lot of people do seem to agree for the most part. So I think I have always taken on a role of listening and trying to really understand what the person across from me is saying, wherever they're coming from, whatever formed it. Because even if we might agree that sanctuary cities are a good thing, we might have gotten there very differently, we might have very different approaches, and we can really shed daylight and find opportunity for productive dialogue by talking to each other, by understanding where each of us is coming from. So listening is always my first approach. And I think where I can, I always have found myself in a position of service, so it doesn't matter to me the ideological underpinnings behind getting a gender-neutral bathroom in the gym, which is something I plan to work on as Speaker of the Student Body. It matters to me that my fellow students feel equal access to this college that I do. How we get there is a different conversation. But in every conversation, I think it's important to have respect, to not immediately look at the other person as your combatant or your enemy, but also understand that we are in a difficult climate and that there are realities of harm, as Clark has mentioned. And I think that's the only line that I can really draw.
Well, so the first part was about this polarization, in the age of Trump, and I think that this is kind of exaggerated because I think the polarization has actually started a lot before Trump ever came around, and Trump is actually probably more a product than a cause of much of the polarization. And it's difficult to say exactly, oh, this is what's causing polarization. But I think this question of harm in some way kind of speaks to it because, if can't like bend my head down and look at everyone. If you have the belief that a differing opinion, just a differing opinion, not actions, but just words or ideas, could actually cause you harm, it becomes very difficult to actually engage with people that you genuinely disagree with. And it becomes easy to draw sort of arbitrary lines to box who can and can't have an opinion in. So for example, you might say, I'm willing to talk about issues, but as long as no one says something hateful. And if someone says, okay, well, let's talk about gender, and then someone says, I think that gender is biological, it's a fact of science, and you say, well, that's hateful. That I don't really think you could label something like that as hateful. So how do you, if you're really going to say something is hateful language or something is causing harm, I think you have to demonstrate that it's causing a directly physical form of harm, because otherwise it becomes all too easy to conflate things that you disagree with or that cause you discomfort with things that actually are causing the harm. And I mean, one of the ways in which I've come to this idea is that growing up, my mom always reminded me day after day, my life is much harder than your life is ever going to be. And that's true. And the things that, are actually hurtful are not words. You can't get caught up in words and ideas and say this and that bothers me. You have to really be careful about what causes you harm in claiming a sort of, I guess it would be called the victim status, saying someone's hurt me, I need help. So you have to be very careful about that, or otherwise it's going to be very difficult to have a conversation in the first place. I also am partial to a quote by Carl Schmitt, who said that politics is about distinguishing friend from enemy. And I do think that at the heart of politics it's going to be about disagreement. You're disagreeing with everyone. People generally have their own unique opinion, or generally people have a unique opinion. But at the same time, I don't think that you will get very far. Oftentimes I'm talking with people that you genuinely disagree and persuading them. I think the value in talking to people that you disagree with oftentimes is from building better arguments for yourself, more better understanding your own side of things, so then you can go out and try and argue that. And if someone comes up with a better argument, then you should probably change your mind or in some way nuance your opinion. And I think that there are very different levels of value in speaking with people that you disagree with. There can be a personal value in I'm going to learn something. There can be a general sort of common good in that I want to engage in this conversation so that I may persuade people or share a truth with people. But I do think, I will say that it gets to a point at certain times where discourse is impossible and that you can't always talk with the people you most severely disagree with because you won't ever be able to have a sort of common ground where you can agree on even definition of terms. If people can't agree to, this might be difficult to explain, in such a short time, but let's just say people have different ideas about freedom, and their ideas are so different that they're almost in different paradigms, might be a way of saying it. I don't think that you can solve everything just by talking. Discourse can't always be the final solution, or the end, what we do. Not a great way to phrase that. But I don't think that discourse can solve everything, but it should probably always be a first step.
Roger, I'm challenging the question in a sense, because to me this is a matter of passion. It's not a matter of duty. This is not a matter of, well, we should try to understand each other, eat your broccoli. Okay? We have an opportunity to confront extraordinarily different points of view, people who live in different stories than we do. Smart people, decent people, coming from what the heck could this possibly mean? And to rise up out of this mood of obligation and earnestness, and to see this as an opportunity to be grasped, because it's just fascinating. You are just fascinating to me. I have many friends who are ferocious leftists who detest Trump. And I have many friends who are ferocious populars who adore Trump. These are smart, decent people. Okay, not all of them. Okay. These are smart, decent people by and large. Okay? And I'm teasing Lucian, but I hope he knows that I'm teasing.
I will say Lucian, so
Lucian.
Lucian was a tease too.
Oh, okay, Lucian, thank you for the correction. So, Roger, I'm challenging the premise of the question.
Accept.
Good. Okay. The last point is, you're living in a very privileged bubble inside of a long, invisible depression. The American economy has chugged along at about half of its historic trend rate for the last 17 or 18 years under both Republicans and Democrats, both in the White House and in Congress. If it had grown at a normal rate, there would be fewer people to fill jobs than there were jobs to be filled. Wages would be bid up. You would be going forth into a roaring job market and onto a fast growth to affluence, instead of coming out, having been prejudiced by going into a stagnant economy and possibly, unless you are exceptionally privileged, like your parents, saddled with student debt. This is something that is not discussed. Donald Trump sold the dream. Whether he meant it, whether he was sincere or insincere, whether he's competent to deliver it or not deliver it. Donald Trump, among these 17 or 18 or 19 candidates, I kind of lost count. It depends upon whether you want to drag Jill Stein and Gary Johnson into the mix, was the only one who was selling the dream. What? You guys have to overthrow us now, because we're doing it. My generation is doing a terrible job of generating the dream. So what the hell is taking you guys so long to overthrow us, take power, and by your own terms, make America great again? I'm challenging you.
Double a challenge. Question and you. Thank you, Lucian.
So I think there's incredible value in actually interacting with one another. It's something that I personally would feel ignorant if I didn't do. And what we had happen in the past year, where there were these like mass Facebook unfriendings, or people actually created plugins online to block conservative media, or to block media from the other point. I think the only way we can all be, not only just be intelligent or have a dialogue, but know what we believe ourselves, is to understand the other viewpoint. And when we start cutting ourselves off intentionally from that, it's highly anti-intellectual. And it really does perplex me how that started. And I will blame the origin of that movement on liberal arts schools, sort of like Barb, hence my 3-star Yelp review. So going down the list here, I will say I fully agree with Annie. I am going to push back on Clark with the notion of limits on free speech. I mean, I've talked to, when I was, before BARD, actually one of the reasons I even got into BARD was I sent in press clippings from when I was a talk radio show host in high school. And one of my regular guests was Shirley Phelps-Roper. I don't know if you guys know her, she's not really a big thing now, but she had the God Hates Fags Church, or Westboro Baptist Church. Although it would have been funnier if she called it the God Hates Fags Church. So she was a regular guest, and her answer to any question: my parents are getting divorced, my girlfriend won't sleep with me, I'm scared because I'm being socially ostracized for whatever reason. It was always, well, you're going to hell, so it doesn't matter. Which again, I mean, it was a bit, I thought it was funny, and so she was a weekly guest. So that, I mean, open conversation. So to take these people, to even take me that seriously, to take anybody that you oppose seriously as this oppressive force, where, oh, there should be limits because of these people, there's a huge joke, Justin, of doing that. And I will say, this probably is the first school that has acknowledged that joke. And between Roger and Botstein, they have acknowledged, well, you know, Lucian sort of functions off of relative elements of outrage. And so let's try not to be outraged. Which is true, because there's a huge joke when you guys get so uptight about essentially saying things that comedians said in the 80s. I mean, there's a reason Jerry Seinfeld, Dave Chappelle, all the incredible 1990s, early 2000s comedians won't even touch a liberal arts school. It's because this mentality that has manifested throughout a lot of American liberal arts education, and it's very, very unfortunate because it also closes down conversation. Okay, so, and then moving on, Kevin, you're the most brilliant political speaker that I've heard in a while. So applause to that. Nothing you said, well, you didn't really say anything, but nothing was objectionable whatsoever. And it was just, it was so wonderful to hear somebody with that sharp a tongue navigate the question. So my God, meet me after the lecture.
Not even Thank you. Yeah, whole other reason for this panel. I should say, we should ask me if there were any people I could set him up with when he came up here. So
I found one.
Full, he did. So full, you know, we have to be honest and transparent here. The last question is my favorite because it's the test. How well have you been listening, right? So I'm going to ask each of you, and let's try and keep the answers short, but let's see what you have to say. What did someone from the other side say that really surprised you, or that you found you could agree with, or you found some common ground with. So we'll mix it up a little bit here. Lucian, do you feel comfortable going first on this one?
Yeah, sure. Okay. Yeah, I don't know, to be completely honest. Nothing really surprised me necessarily. The only thing which I just mentioned was Kevin's incredible sense of rhetoric, which I will commend to no end. It's something I wish I can do. I find it easier to go my route. If I could take that on, I probably, by all means, I'll give you my job at the Gateway Pundit, and then most likely become a president and whatever you're running for. It does seem like you're running for something. So, I don't know, and I fully agree with Annie. You know, I tend to agree with the other side if they're being rational. I did see multiple posts before I came here. One of them was a Google Doc that called me a white supremacist. That's funny considering I'm a Jew dating a Hispanic. And a faggot, obviously, if you didn't catch that. So I don't know. I sort of agree with all of you. I understand where you're coming from, and I admire the ability to speak about it, to be honest.
Okay. Kevin, maybe you found something surprising.
Annie warned me that I was Lucian's type, so this is the same. I found two things surprising. One of them I found about Lucian, one of them I found about Ralph. Lucian, I've come across some of your work in preparation for this panel, and
Of course, yeah.
what interests me about you is that you came from here, and that you ate and climbed just like me, and you came to all these places and you sat here just like me, but we look at the world so differently. And we're here tonight having this conversation, and I think that that's an important exercise. I am interested in your critiques of how the student body here has thought of you and reacted to you and perceived your work once again. It's been an exercise in finding common ground to study you in a way. So I do think that your performance, which I found strangely mirrored in our president and in Kellyanne Conway and in Sean Spicer. So, Lucian, clearly you're viable for the White House now. It's interesting the way that this act, and not act, but you call yourself a political performer, right? A political artist. It's fascinating to no end. And Ralph, for you, I found very interesting the question of passion and where it is, right, amongst our generation. It's something that I think here at Bard we all seem to think of ourselves that we don't care about anything, and that, you know, the previous elections before for Speaker of the Student Body were somewhere around 200 voter rates, but we came out in huge numbers, hundreds this time. So it is there. We all care very deeply about our college, what we hold to be the truth, what we hold to be valuable and beautiful in the world. But I really appreciated that you brought attention to it.
Thank you, Kevin.
I was a little bit, I guess what I enjoyed learning was that Lucian told us we shouldn't take it too seriously. And I guess that's kind of, you know, what I would say I've learned from this is that, you know, it's very important to take a step back and realize it's not that serious a lot of times. Sometimes, you know, it is that serious. But, you know, especially at a place like this, where you're on a college campus, you have food, you have water, you have shelter. You know, even if your food may not be that great, or, you know, your dorm isn't great, you don't really have to worry about getting by day to day. You don't have to worry about living and dying. So, you know, it really should kind of, I think this is what you're speaking to as well, Ralph, it should be more kind of, or it should be less about duty, perhaps, than seeing it as, you know, some sort of great task that you have to do, and it's, you know, the end of the world, and if somebody doesn't agree with you, they're a white supremacist, or, you know, they're a liberal snowflake or whatever, you know, I think that is, if that's what you're saying, and in a way, I think what Lucian is trying to say is that, you know, it is kind of a joke at the end of the day. It is funny to say offensive things sometimes. It is funny to push people's buttons, whether or not it's Trump or it's, you know, some liberal person. You know, it's funny to get people to a point where it's all about nonsense and everyone's making these ridiculous things. And when things aren't that important, when it's something about, you know, what policy is our college going to take on for the next couple of years before some other administrator changes it, we really should kind of remember to laugh at ourselves and to laugh at what's going on. So yeah, I think that's kind of what I learned and took away from this.
Okay, those of you who aren't John Waters when he started, when Divine bit the head off of a chicken and they said it would set homosexuality back decades, okay? Remember, any challenging artist, hopefully, the people you applaud, Ethan just outlined it beautifully, and you didn't receive it. So, I mean, that alone is concerning. Think about it.
Clark, you want to go?
I've got a few things. I don't want to use the word surprising, maybe noteworthy. Ralph, I really appreciated what you said about older generations needing to step down and allow. No, I know. This is me twisting your words right now for my own gain. That's how I'm interpreting it. Lucian, I think it's interesting that your defense against being called a white supremacist on the internet was that your boyfriend is Mexican.
Why am I a white supremacist?
Oh, I did not call you that right now, which no need to take the defensive. Listening is key. We talked about this in the green room. I think it very noteworthy, very interesting that, you know, it does not matter who you are or who you date or what your various identities may be. You can still be racist, you can still be a white supremacist, you can still be homophobic, you can still be transphobic. It does not matter if you are gay, it does not matter if you are trans, it does not matter if you are black, if you are brown, it does not matter who you are, like, you can still be any of those things. That's still, you know. So I think you should remember that. And you know, I was definitely surprised at Ethan for not being nearly as crass, rude, or vicious as he is online.
I think you're being a bit underhanded right now in which you're saying things that appear to be civil, but they actually aren't very civil. So I'd ask if you could please be civil.
It would.
I will say, I do like how the applause with some of these comments sounds like scattered rain.
Yeah, Clark, you're going to continue.
I was actually complimenting your civility. And yeah, I just wanted to say thank you for not calling me a nit on this panel.
Okay.
Roger, perched as I am here on the precipice of eternity, it's really impossible to surprise me. where I'm in reruns, okay?
The second most conservative and the second oldest man in the universe.
That said, I would just like to tip my hat to the new teacher's pet, Annie Seaton, for having shared an extraordinarily dazzling narrative with her fusion of what would appear to be polar opposites. I don't know if I should give this away, but if anybody here could see, this is the secret ring of the vast right-wing conspiracy. It's the Tai Chi ball of yin and yang. If you ever see that, you know that you have a serious right paleo-conservative on your hands. And Andy, you have brought together such extraordinary polarities in a way that is pulsating, dynamic, and clearly vital that I just humbling your reward. So I'm sorry if I'm privileging you and prejudicing the rest of you guys. Get over it. But one shot, and I don't know if I should like pop any bubbles here today and destroy so many innocent people's fantasies, but the green room is not, in fact, green.
Wisdom from Albert here before we move on to questions.
I'm also very old as well, and one of the things from my many decades that I recall is that there was a time in the 60s and 70s when it was the left. People like the Panthers, Abby Hoffman, I loved reading his books when I was a little kid. I think I wasn't quite supposed to. Things like Steal This Book, the Yippies, etc. They were the ones doing political performance art, and the right was straight and sort of somber and serious. And so I find it really fascinating. There's been this kind of interesting inversion. So that intrigues me, sort of stylistically. Although I do see one of my students here attempting to kind of keep up the political performance art on the left. Hi, B. And then Ralph, I was fascinated by the reference to leotard.
Do you call her Bean?
B, the letter B. You know, many BART students go by just, not even just one word, but just one initial. We all know who it is.
Groupthink.
But so Ralph, I was fascinated by the allusion to postmodernism and the sense of the critique of meta-narratives as something that could possibly be a kind of, could add sort of a rhetorical energy and freedom to the way that we're thinking about political discourse. I find that very exciting and interesting. I do think that it's fascinating. I feel like I'm learning from all of the younger people on the panel because there have been such generational shifts. And I'm not sure whether we were better at talking across ideological differences in the past or not. I mean,
Never.
No,
Never.
it's never really worked.
Never worked.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean we should stop.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like such an important exercise.
Thank you very much. I want to thank all the panelists now for having participated and gone through the first, what really is the living room conversation model. The idea of it is to get people talking to each other who wouldn't normally be talking. I think we've clearly at least begun that process. Not to say that it's finished or that it has benefits immediately, but I'm glad we started it. But these are not typical living room conversations, these are what we call public. And so it's now a time for you guys to have an opportunity to enter the conversation. Is Willem here with the mic? Or does someone have a mic? Yeah. So I'm gonna recognize people. I'll keep a list. So if you have your hand up, once I see you and acknowledge you, you can put your hand down, and I'll make a list. The first question is over here, Raj.
And it has to do with what you were saying, that Trump sold a dream. And I was recently listening to this George Carlin bit where he was calling out baby boomers for being selfish and indulgent, and they went from saying, oh, just be your own thing, to by the end of, to where they're at now is the person with the most toys is the one who sort of calls the shots. And sort of this idea that, a talking point that I heard President Obama, or former President Obama mention a lot in his speech was the American dream of just getting by. And obviously Trump has sold people on a different dream than that, and I'm wondering...
Elaborate on that, just to fix your question, because that's stupid.
What's stupid?
So you're saying Trump has discounted the American dream?
No, that's not what I said, Lucian.
Okay.
Excuse me, we're gonna let Ralph try. I don't know what your question is, so I'm gonna make a statement.
Okay, go ahead.
If you actually have a question.
I do. Okay. President Obama said that the American dream was to just get by. It's something he said a lot. But I'm asking you, what is the dream that Trump has sold Americans on? And when I was younger, I thought that... What is the question that Trump has sold Americans on?
Okay, I'm gonna get to this, but I have to recontextualize it because it's a point of honor. We baby boomers were amazing in our day. We almost eradicated world poverty. No, I'm not making this up. This is World Bank statistics. The number of people who have come out of world poverty has been staggering. And we're looking now, based upon the forces that we set loose, to eradicate dire world poverty within 20 years. We have taken the number of liberal republics, as opposed to authoritarian countries, up from about 30 to about 100. Now there's been some erosion. Got it. We brought down, and our parents brought down the Nazis, and we brought down the totalitarian dictatorships of the left. Well, no. And then you dropped the ball because we got tired. So, just as a start, okay, the baby boomers are much maligned. We did some, yes, you.
When I was 3 years old.
Yes, when you were 3 years old, for heaven's sakes. Come on. It's time for, we move the world toward classical liberal republicanism, in the small r sense of that, and toward unprecedented prosperity. In 1980, world GDP was $11 trillion. It's now $73 trillion, and most of that growth has come from previously underdeveloped countries. We've left you. Please send me a box of chocolates, a rose, and a thank you note. Some really, please, some really, if you have a question.
Yeah, I'll ask my question.
Thank you, but I'm answering this question right now. We've left you with some really interestingly big problems to solve, particularly ecological ones. The thing that keeps me awake at night is the state of the oceans. Step up. We perform miracles. I want you to perform miracles. You have to push us aside. We're not going to let go. But do it. Now that said, the dream is one of both idealism and prosperity. The ultimate dream is peace and prosperity. We brought the world much closer, and I would add ecology.
What do you want to say, Lucian? Don't
we brought the world much closer now. Time for you guys to step up.
Okay. We have right here in the second row. I don't know your.
Hi, I have a question for Lucian, which is, why did you lie about being disinvited to this talk? There's a video of you which was posted, I believe, by Elite Daily on Facebook, where you claimed you were disinvited. I don't know whatever happened with the NYU talk, but you did claim that you were disinvited here. Why did you lie about that? And is that an attempt to propagate this narrative that you are actually being shut out? And I think we should commend BARD on actually keeping this event running and actually having you here. And I think you should recognize this for that. So why don't you stop this lie about it? And then the other thing, let's just keep moving.
Well, okay, well, you really have a second part. What's the second part?
The second part is just, Ralph, you talked about let's say you have-
no.
Okay,
It's
okay,
between
fine.
people, I'm going to do the first part.
Okay.
Okay, so I was initially invited here, actually with a very far left friend of mine back in October. His avant-garde, and he capitalizes off of some of these sociological trends that we have. We remained friends for a while up until Trump actually won. I was invited to bar. I was shortly thereafter told, well, students are too stressed out about the election, so we need to delay this. And I'm not going. It doesn't matter. After.
Lucian, were you actually invited, or was there sort of a discussion about?
There was a discussion. Okay, there was a discussion. That's true. That's true.
We're going to try and get to the bottom of this. Inspector here.
First of all, vertical stripes would look a lot more flattering.
Fucking liar. How does my kid smell my vagina from here? You commented on a lot of people's genitals. No, seriously. I would love for you because you're an artist. You're an artist, right? So why don't you try the theater?
Okay, Lucian, you want to continue?
Wow.
Why
Well,
don't you
if I'm a theater performer, you should be in the theater right now. And I will say, even at the theater, with your body, babe, do not wear horizontal stripes. Such being said. Well, you know, that is a crystal glass.
Come on, guys. Listen.
Hey, let's stop this.
Please.
Hey, everybody calm down.
Listen.
Calm down.
Listen, guys, please sit down. Please sit down. All right. Lucian, you had a question on the table.
He had an actual question, which I was prepared to answer before she stole my crystal glass.
We'll get it back for you. Don't.
Full of, I will say, a low-priced whiskey. Oh my God.
Can we make something clear?
Go ahead.
There's no situation in which it's acceptable to speak to her the way you did. And I want to make that clear.
You are a brilliant political speaker, which I will show immense respect for. When somebody's wearing a horizontally striped shirt, when they shouldn't, and then screaming at me and stealing my whiskey, I think I'm allowed to say whatever I want.
Well, you're allowed. It doesn't mean it's right. But let's.
We do live in America, after all.
We do. And you're allowed to make a fool of yourself in America. That is one of the constitutional rights. But I actually would like us to have a conversation. There was a question, right, which is why you lied about being disinvited from Bard. You said you were invited and then uninvited, but that wasn't actually the case, so I'd like you to continue with the question.
Well, that was the relative case. I was asked to potentially speak twice. First, I was told that students were too scared because the elections were still happening. And then I was told because of all the polls and the poll data, delay it until after the elections, right? After the elections, Trump won. I was actually sitting next to Martin Scarelli, who if you guys know him. And he said, Lucian, I really hope that I know it won't happen, but Hillary's going to win and I'm going to be indicted shortly after that. And I said, no, Martin, we're going to dream. And Trump, lo and behold, he won. And we were all, to be completely honest, in shock. And the week after that, I received copious death threats. And I had to stay indoors for that week. But Liberty, America, this country did end up winning. And I was very, very excited and elated by that. And you know, well, that wasn't really a right to steal another person's property. I feel like, I mean, that's how we used to function in the early days of America. Can somebody pass that crystal glass back to me? Yeah, actually, you can. Yeah. Thank you.
All right, let's go to the next question. Yes, right there, next to it.
Hi, I'm Hayes, and I'd like to start by thanking Roger for hosting this. We really didn't have enough stories to fill all of our pages, and this is great. We're coming up real soon.
Anything for the barred free person.
And so I have a question for Lucian. Spectre says what?
Shut up!
What? Spectre says what?
You said you're from the Barred Free Press.
Yes.
How open are you about students' missions?
We're open to pretty much anything students submit, provided it's not hate speech or just...
What do you consider, so are you, what's your position with Barred Free Press?
I'm the editor-in-chief.
Oh, incredible. Okay, so what's an example of an article? If Ethan wrote an article, what was the last article that you dismissed, that you didn't actually print?
I took over the Free Press earlier this semester, and I have not received any articles that we dismissed.
So you've been printing everything?
Yes.
Literally everything you've received, you've been printing?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. Jeez. Okay.
We
Never mind.
I
didn't know.
Please submit to the Free Press. We need more submissions.
Mark, right there, have his hand up.
This is for Ethan. Ethan, I am very interested to know how it is that you can sit here and say the things that you've said, which I think actually many of us to some extent would agree with about open dialogue and stuff. But then at the same time, go on Facebook, go on all sorts of social media platforms and call people faggots.
I've never called anyone a faggot.
That's a lie.
That's a lie. That's a lie.
That is a lie.
I'm sorry, Ethan, first and foremost, I'm not these other people. You go listen to this question and then you will respond. Okay? Thank you. Alright? So what I'm asking you, you can respond when I'm done. What I'm asking you is how can you say this? All of these things about open dialogue, open speech, open freedom, and all sorts of things. And then at the same time, accost your fellow students. Some of us who have actually at different points in time come to defend you. Right? There are clear receipts of you calling students all manner of horrible things.
Walmart printed out your receipt.
No, as in like screenshots. Saying that if we weren't on this campus, for instance, right? I will knock your teeth out. Like those kinds of things, those kinds of threats. How can you both reconcile being the kind of like troll, wanting to press people's buttons so that you can have the so-called civil discourse, when that doesn't lead to civil discourse, and then sit your ass on this panel and talk about open and free dialogue?
When was the last time you were attacked? When was the last time
Lucian, hey, Lucian, shut the fuck up.
Okay, first things first. I never called anyone a faggot. I mean, I could speak. No, when I was in high school, people called each other faggots all the time. Call me a faggot. I'm referring to a word that has been already spoken. So people would call each other this word, which we all know, and all the time. And so, I don't even think it's that big of a deal if people insult each other. It has more to do with your intention behind these insults. So just saying, oh, you've said this word, you're evil, that's completely ridiculous. And also, I didn't say that, so it's also completely ridiculous. I do, on the other hand, I think that this idea of civil discourse does become, in a sense, an oppressive idea. They say that you have to respond to anything that anyone ever says with absolute humility, patience, and stability. I will admit, at a certain time, or quite often, in fact, I've gotten very annoyed at people who have said crazy things. When somebody calls me a white supremacist, calls me a racist, a colonialist, an imperialist, just ridiculous things. I mean, I wish I had an empire, but I don't. You know, and you can only kind of respond by saying, I think you're kind of crazy. I have said at times, I think that you're stupid. Is this the right thing to do all the time? Perhaps not. Is it the perfect response? Perhaps not. But I do think that there is a value in speaking honestly, and if I feel that someone is stupid, I probably will say, I think that you're stupid.
You don't use the word stupid, you used the word retarded.
Sometimes, you know.
For clarification.
If I feel that someone's acting in a retarded way, I will say that you're acting in a retarded way. If you would want me to be that specific. I don't think that words are that important. I think the intention behind them is more important. And I think that this whole charade of pretending, you know, that word is, it's just about acting. Mark, what you've given us is a very good acting performance. You want your friends to think that you're cool. You want to get up and get attention. So you've made a bunch of ridiculous claims. And I think that's the heart of the whole problem, is that people are more concerned with calling each other white supremacists than actually solving things.
Ethan, how do you
We're going to go on to the next.
I have screenshots of you calling friends of mine faggots and calling me it.
Listen, as a columnist, online columnist with millions of page views, I just want to put in a kind word for trolls. Okay. I get called all kinds of things by trolls on Forbes online where I publish. Really, really, really mean things. And when I respond, which I often do, is I say, you know, a bridge isn't much of a bridge without a troll behind it. And without a troll under it. I'm really, really glad that you guys are here in the ecology to keep all the fairy tale ecology balanced. And all I have to say is, I'm just a little billy goat gruff. So, just be mindful, Mr. Troll. So, just a kind word for trolls, of the left and the right, okay? Thank you, Roger.
Yeah. I'm trying to... All right, in there, in the middle.
Hello. I think that something that I'm really interested in the way that things have progressed after the election is the fact that people from both sides of the argument have used the claim fake news, and I would like to hear everyone's thoughts on the fact that this is happening, or that this claim is being made by both sides. Argument.
Okay, great, good question. Does anyone...
Kellyanne might have sent you.
I could respond to the fake news question. I think what I found really interesting is that I think this kind of fake news has been around for a while. Like tabloids, you know, for a while you've had these tabloid magazines that say outrageous things that are clearly untrue, like Elvis is really an alien, or you know, Martha Stewart is a lizard person, and they had a sort of appeal to people. People bought them, that's why they kept being produced. The difference now is that they're of a political nature. And I think one of the reasons that this kind of fake news charge is going around is because there is a lot of things that are fake news, and since politics has become so wrapped up with entertainment, we've essentially moved our tabloid interest away from just the tabloids and put it into politics.
I guess I'd like to wonder, and we have two national journalists on the panel. I mean, Lucian, you write for Gateway Pundit, which I think some people in the room would think of as a site that at least has dabbled in fake news. I don't know what your thoughts on this is. I just want to know what you think fake news is and what you think it isn't. It would be actually just helpful for me to know.
Yeah, I will say, personally, which is something that I will outwardly admit, because I don't think it's necessarily helpful. Everything is fake news. BuzzFeed, Huffington Post, everything from the right to the left is relative fake news, because that is what sells advertising. And before my current job, as some of you might know, I was in advertising. So we are all working, whoever made the fart sound, I wasn't advertising, and you can look to my LinkedIn profile. I didn't understand that word. Such being said, I mean, that is what makes us money. We right now have such an incredible divide in this country, and we are perpetuating certain beliefs. And as a journalist, whether you consider me that or not, for me to actually understand the story, I do have to read far too many articles from the left and far too many from the right to actually understand what's going on. We don't have any sort of actually truly objective news right now. It just doesn't exist, and it's highly, highly frustrating. Everything absolutely is highly emotionally slanted. And the stories that I personally write about are going to be slanted towards the right, and I will not deny that. To me, that makes it more genuine than what's happening on the left, where they say we're completely open-minded journalists, we're reporting on the facts. It's like, no, dude, there's obvious agendas here. So I don't know. We're all at this point. Roger, we're all trying to sell advertising. We're either right or left. Most people, if you have a middle school grasp of education, can gather what is left and right news. Ideally, we'll all be reading all of it.
Do you want to add to this? Another correspondent?
Just briefly, deconstructionism kind of opened this Pandora's box. And when you are, I'll defer to Annie, who is infinitely more erudite on these matters than I am, but from my layperson's point of view, getting to the question about questions of we have only the text and so forth, it began to put a different kind of view of facts, and it shifted the culture. And I think, I'm not saying in a bad way, but that cultural shift, the news is downstream from the culture. The cultural shift has led to a different way of holding facts. And so it's really important to be able to do that with integrity, but without naivete. And so when I hear fake news, I usually hear it from one side as leveled at the other side in an effort to discredit a political opponent. Not so much internally, in a reflective kind of way, saying, am I doing my level best to rigorously approximate the truth to the best of my ability?
I'm going to just say a little bit about this, since it's something I teach and write on, which is that I think Lucian and Ralph are making an important point, which is that news, political news, is opinion, right? Because there are facts, right? There's facts about whether it's how warm the planet has gotten or how many crimes have been committed. And then there are the opinions that one builds on that. And news has always been more or less opinionated. There's been times in the history of this country when news was very opinionated and every paper had a different opinion. And there's been a time which a lot of people now look back at the golden age, some people don't, in which the New York Times and a couple of other papers really tried to set out an opinion that was a middle-of-the-road kind of opinion. But I think what I'd say to the question is, there's a difference between the fake news in that we take facts and we slant them, and the complete construction of facts that don't exist. And that's important, not simply because it leads to the wrong opinions or the right opinions. If you read one side making their fake facts and fake opinions, it could lead to the good side, the other side, the bad side, depending on your opinions. But what it leads to is the loss of a common world, a loss that we actually can talk to each other and have a conversation on a panel like this, and we share some facts. And to me, one of the things, I don't know who it was who said it, I think it might have been Lucian or maybe either talking about Lucian, about the importance of being funny and of nonsense and pranks. And I think that's incredibly valid. We do need more fun in the world. And yet, there's something deeply serious about the factual nature of the world that we share. And if we simply laugh at our destruction of that, such that people no longer trust each other, and no longer trust that we can talk to each other, and that we can't talk about the earth or the environment and oceans, and have any faith that we actually believe that these are actually facts, there's nothing left that holds us together, and there's no way we can make progress. And so it strikes me that there is a danger to the kind of willingness to blow the shit up, which I understand as an interest of many in the Trump movement, but is something that for someone who's studied totalitarianism is exactly what people, the elite in that period, said and did, and it can lead to incredibly destabilizing effects. So I see in the third row there, you have your hand up. Yeah.
So this is a question for Ethan and Lucian, and I would appreciate a serious answer without resorting to personal attacks. How do you say that, both of you say that words don't really mean anything or have an effect, and it's funny to push people's buttons and upset them. How do you reconcile that with the fact that there have been an uptick in numbers of incidents in which minorities, especially Jews and Muslims, have been attacked after our president has advocated for eradicating the rights of those people?
Yeah, okay, so there's a couple of things that need to be clarified here. So when I say that words, it's a very, very nuanced thing, because, you know, if I were to say people should go out and murder, you know, a group of people that I don't like, and they go out and murder those people, at some level I would kind of be responsible, because I've told them to go do something and done it. On the other hand, the actual thing that's happened, which we're all upset about, is that someone's been murdered. And so I think that it's problematic in certain senses to draw such a direct line from the things that people say and the way that those are interpreted and then carried out. And in terms of how important words are, and that words matter, you know, I think that words are very important. Words do matter. But at the end of the day, a word is something that you hear. It can't actually hurt you. It can't hurt who you actually are inside. You know, someone can call you an idiot nonstop doesn't make you an idiot.
So you don't believe in libel or slander?
I mean, libel or slander. What do you mean?
Those are both words. Those are
Okay,
words.
so I am absolutely going to jump in here. The news stories you're quoting, right? You're saying, oh, there has been this. First of all, it's based on a humorously false notion, which is really sweet. But the notion that for whatever reason conservatives are anti-Jew or anti-whatever.
I didn't say conservative.
Well, you said under the Trump government, under the terrible Trump regime. Under the terrible Trump regime,
I did not say
we've been met with multiple anti-Jew crimes. And what I'm going to respond to that with is the vast majority of those crimes that you've seen in the news, which have gotten so much play, and something I said from the beginning, is it's false flag operations. One of the biggest ones, that guy, well, thank you for knowing, who's the fat guy?
Alex Jones.
Alex Jones, thank you. Yeah, let's see if the rest of that is okay, yeah, so I mean, that is one of his terms. But what I will say is the vast majority of those threats against one of my very good liberal Jewish friends, who's also, by the way, a lesbian, called me out and she was like, Lucian, Trump's in power right now. The JCCs are getting bomb threats. And I said, I bet you it is not coming from the right. And she said, well, why is it happening now? And I said, wait for it. The FBI is going to investigate. This is coming from the left. This is too weird and too specific, and there aren't bombs anywhere to be coming from the right whatsoever. Lo and behold, a black guy is upset at his Jewish girlfriend, and he called in half those threats. And he was arrested by the motherfucking FBI. And half the other threats that were called against Jews were coming from leftists, lo and behold. So saying we have a Republican president right now, and there are so many Jew threats, stop doing them, babe.
I need to jump in here.
We're on, okay, this is the last few, I'm gonna let people make a last very quick comment, because we have to wrap
Yeah,
up.
so first of all, words. So eugenics, which was based on the classification and the categorization of people using language and using science into sort of, this group is gonna get to be sterilized or exterminated, and this group is gonna get to live. One of the things I discovered when I was a graduate student at Harvard writing my dissertation, partly on the history of eugenics, was that they did eugenics experiments at Harvard itself to try to prove that Harvard undergraduates were part of the master race. While I was in graduate school, the book The Bell Curve also came out there. Segregation too, racial segregation, which was the reason that my black mother, despite being salutatorian of her high school, was not allowed to go to Northwestern, because they told her they'd already filled the black quota. So that word, black, attached to my mother's body, meant that she didn't have an equal educational opportunity. That's why words like retarded, Ethan, which I'm honestly deeply ashamed as a faculty member and an administrator here at Bart, to hear you say approvingly, you know, and Lucian, honestly, what you said to be too, those things embarrass me. We have a 6-year-old, and when she says those things, she actually already knows better, not to say them. But, you know, the truth is that those words actually do have implications. They actually do. It's not just about emotional harm. It's about the history of the way that these categories have been deployed. As a matter of fact, also, hate crimes, the two biggest categories, as we know from the recent Hate Watch presentation at the Teach-In that some of you saw, Rose Falvey came and talked about this. The two top categories are actually blacks and Muslims, followed closely by queer and trans people in terms of hate crimes, which are way up. You know, that just happens to be true as far as anyone can tell. There have also been a lot of anti-Semitic crimes. That's also way up. They've been happening in New York City.
Will you acknowledge
so,
they're all coming from leftists?
They're not all coming from leftists.
Every single hate
you know
crime.
that's not true.
That is true. Every single hate crime.
Was it a leftist that said that to me? Are you now a leftist?
Well, I'm innate Jewish. So I can say, is she Jewish? Are you saying that she's Jewish and that was a Jewish hate crime?
No, but you know, I think you've had a bit to drink here today too.
Yeah, we're gonna. Okay, I want to ask you all to at least join us at one time in thanking this panel for doing what they've done today. Thank you very much. I want to thank all of you for being here and engaging with this. You know, we are living through a time when it's very hard to have these conversations. And on college campuses, it's been incredibly hard, and I'm really very excited and proud that all of you were here and were such a good audience. Thank you very much.